Welcome! You are listening to the CRM Success Show, where you will hear from CRM executives who have overseen some of the most interesting and complex CRM implementations. Your hosts, David Masri and Kiro Whitey, will be bringing you real stories, real insight. Follow along on social media for updates on new episode releases, exclusive content, and much more. Enjoy the show and thanks for listening.
Welcome to the CRM Success Show, where we deep dive into CRM success and failure, delivering real stories with real impact. I'm Dave Masri,
And I'm Kiro Whitey.
and today we're talking with Pranav Lal, Head of Business Technology and Enterprise Systems at Gusto. Welcome, Pranav.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Kiro. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Pleasure to have you here today, Pranav. Thank you. So we're going to start real nice and simple today. Just give our listeners an overview, Pranav, of your role as Head of Business Technology and Enterprise Systems at Gusto. What does that really mean? And what did Gusto do?
Sure. So, to start with, Gusto is a payroll provider. We provide services to primarily SMB segment. So it's a very niche segment. And also within SMB, it's a much smaller size employees. So think of very small businesses which are really getting started and that just enables a lot of equity amongst kind of small business owners here in US. Uh, so Gusto provides payroll services, HR services, insurance, and other support in terms of tax filing and support as companies do payroll. Uh, for my role here at Gusto, so I lead our business technologies enterprise systems team, which is primarily all the tools that we use here to support our sales and CX teams. Salesforce is definitely at the front and center of it. It's the central tool, which is used by about 2,500 users here at Gusto. And then telephony is also a big part of it because given the nature of our business, we have many clients and we get in a lot of inquiries on a day-to-day basis. So that's what I do here.
Perfect. So to paint the picture a little bit, that will lead us into today's topic, which is heavily focused around leadership and motivating teams and some of your beliefs on leadership as well. I think it's really important to kind of fast forward, rewind to 18 months ago when you were joining Gusto. Just give us an idea of kind of what you inherited in terms of the team size, some of the external kind of vendors and SIs in the picture, and just kind of where the projects were at, what was the kind of mentality in the business around the projects, were they successful, were they not? Just paint a picture of kind of what you inherited.
Sure. Yeah. So when I joined Gusto about 18 months back, we were going through, we were coming out of a rough implementation of our service cloud with one of the big GSI companies, right? So the go live was pretty chaotic. It burnt out a lot of the team. It blurred boundaries between our tech teams and the business teams. And that led to attrition on the team. So we lost about 7 team members within a span of 6 months. And that really had an impact on morale. People felt, pretty burnt out trying to manage all the things. Doing a transformative project like of kind of redoing Service Cloud is a pretty big deal, especially for a company like ours, where we get so many cases and requests every day. Like we get on an average 100,000 to 200,000 cases a week. So that's a lot of volume. So that did cause, a lot of friction. Things overall were getting impacted in terms of delivery, and especially when people were not at their best from a productivity perspective, that had some impacts. So the org that I inherited was pretty complex with heavy tech debt that we had incurred just because of not having good overall governance and role clarity between engineering teams and Salesforce teams. So we had a overly uh, complicated architecture than it needed to be. We would have a lot of sev ones on a weekly or once every 2 weeks, which would impact productivity for our internal teams, and it would impact some of our customers too. If our Salesforce is impacted, that impacts a lot of our sellers, that impacts a lot of our CX team members. So that was a big thing. So that's kind of what I inherited. So definitely, had a lot of stuff to kind of figure out and work through.
Hmm. So just to put it in perspective, you mentioned 7, 8 team members left in a 6-month period. For context, that was around 25% of the team, correct?
Yeah, roughly around that. Yes.
And these were FTEs
These
primarily?
these were FTEs primarily. Yeah. We do
Okay.
have a significant number of contractors also that support us given the number of things that we have going at any given time. But this specifically was just the FTE numbers.
Yeah. How much do you think that number of the number of resources that left, do you think it was a bit like a domino effect, like one left and another saw the writing on the wall and thought, you know what, Jeff has left, now I'm gonna go, and then the next person was like, Jeff and Sarah's left, now I'm going, like were the team close because it was such an intense project, and do you think that had a domino effect, or what are
Yeah.
your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think partly it was that when one team member leaves, people ask like, "Oh, why are they leaving, and what's causing them to leave?" And then like, "Oh, he or she's leaving." That also maybe a sign that I also should leave. And then part of it was we did not have leadership at from like a Salesforce level. We had senior roles, like we had VP roles, senior VP roles in place, but not someone who understood what happens in their world. So they did not have a lot of support directly from the senior management, which just made them feel like they were just exposed directly to the business, which isn't a bad thing. But when things are moving so quickly and the business needs like this stuff has to make, obviously our stakeholders don't have any um uh, malintent there. It's more of like uh, we want this stuff done. So that just caused a lot of stress to the team where they're like, no matter how much hard work I put in, it just won't get recognized and it'll be a tough situation to come out of.
Okay, I see. We're going to talk about some of the solutions that you embedded later on, to kind of mitigate this
Mhm.
from continuing to be, 50% of the team, right? And kind of, put a plaster on the situation, short term changes you made and longer term changes. But before we move on, I guess just focusing on the GSI piece not working out, not being the best fit. You mentioned chaotic go live that impacted morale. How so? Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think when companies like those do come in, they need to be more understanding of culture, especially when it's a startup, right? Startups are a team that are more kind of like closely knit. They have a certain way of doing things. They have a certain style of implementation. So, and then there are a lot of processes which are not fully baked in or not fully hashed out. So when GSIs come in, they assume certain level of maturity in companies that they are working for. Whereas for startups, sometimes even things like processes are not defined or governance isn't defined. So um, they did not go in deep in understanding what are the different personas, who all will this impact. Have we ensured this the flow of it from sales to CX works? So that did not happen. They were more of like, what are your requirements, and we will build it according to that. So it needed to be more discovery, more conversations that needed to happen. and then making sure that they looped in the right team members. So, to my knowledge, a lot of the team members who were key in this were not in the decision making process. The technical skills were not brought in at the right time. So that's kind of what led to the launch not being very smooth, and there were issues as we went live.
Do you think that GSI took advantage of your lack of maturity, or was it just simply non-intentional?
Yeah, that's where I feel like they're more in the sense robotic of sorts. Like, this is stuff that we need to do. I have this doc and I'm going to work towards it. People have said this is the final requirements doc, and I'm so they it's just more focused, and they just want to come in, hash out a number of hours that they've kind of put in and get that work done. I don't assume any malicious intent there. It's just more of like that's how they operate, and they expect certain things to be in a certain way, and not go like the above and beyond route, or try to do something, try to uncover more and more stick to what they've been given to.
Yeah, I guess the idea of you go into a dealership to buy a car, and you walk in, and say, "I want a red car. It needs to be this size, this shape." They've
Yeah,
given you what you want and asked for, versus maybe presenting a blue car, a different model, which might have been a better purchase for you. In hindsight, it's
yeah,
it's a difficult one, right? Because I think a lot of customers are price sensitive. They want the best deal possible, and they want the least amount of hours as a result, right? How much time do you wait for the statement of work, for the requirement gathering, getting to know the business? A culture alignment as part of a deliverable.
yeah,
I mean, it sounds great, but in theory, is it something a company's going to pay for, right? To get resources to allow them, 3-4 weeks to get to know the business, and billable versus non-billable. It's a tough act to balance, isn't it? So,
yeah,
um, but I think, to your point, it's doing more without being asked, right?
hmm yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's more of like making sure, like, knowing the different roles on the company, which developers have been building what, and just making sure, have you checked with the key Salesforce dev lead on an architecture, or are you just talking to a business stakeholder, and making architectural decisions, right? So there needs to be a balance. Yeah, I fully agree. Like, you can't have people just talking and make that a billable hours for weeks, but just doing the due diligence, like, do you have the full picture, or do you have a partial picture?
Yeah. Maz, I think you had a quick question. I have another question on the GSI front before we move on.
yeah. So generally, you would think that they would know the difference between a sophisticated buyer and a non-sophisticated buyer. The auto dealership for sure knows, right? They can tell in like 30 seconds. Um, so it's surprising that they kind of push this one size fits all, when if you were to go to more, let's say, a boutique shop, they definitely tailor it to the level of sophistication
Yeah,
of their client. Um, so that's why I asked the question, if you felt they were taking advantage of that.
mm,
It might just be that they don't care, and they just tell you up front either your expectations, right? If you ever looked at these contracts, the bigger the company,
yeah,
the more the expectation is on the client. It's almost right. It's like
exactly. Yeah,
it's almost like, who's this contract for? It's like it says what I'm doing, not what you're doing, right?
yeah.
So that was kind of the source of my question. So yeah, so what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, specifically when it comes to contractual language, yeah, those contracts can be pretty hairy. Like, it just goes into very detail of uh, this is the level that they'll be involved in, and then they'll be hands off. So, and most of the time, folks don't have enough time to even read through that. So that does make it more complicated for sure.
My last question on the GSI front, and I think this is a question for most partners in general, and independent resources, contractors, right? In order to bridge that cultural alignment, you've got to see people in person. There's no substitute to being in person and doing it virtually is just not the same, right? So I was curious during that period. I know it kind of was pre your time, but how often? I know it's pandemic as well. Bit of overlap there, maybe. But how often did they get the team on site to visit and kind of embed themselves within the business?
Yeah, from what I've been told, that did not happen. It was
Right.
all remote.
Yeah.
There was
All right.
no in person. But yeah, I totally also believe like in person interactions are definitely much more impactful and valuable.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Over to you, Maz.
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about like at what point did you notice like this is becoming a big morale issue? Um,
Yeah.
and then like what was your approach to, let's say, dealing with it? I'm not sure if that's the right word, or handling it, or coming up with some kind of
Yeah.
lasting solution, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, once I joined the team, my main focus was I'm someone who likes to go deep in understanding what's happening, right? So just the first week in talking to people and then seeing some of the feedback coming from our stakeholders about my team. Um, so my first thing was, okay, I'm hearing there's a lot of negativity where what I'm hearing. Let's just talk to the team and get their perspective, right? So part of it was feedback from our stakeholders where they feel like our team is not being responsive enough or we're not delivering enough, and that just to me meant something is going on, right? Like there's something happening with the team where either are they not feeling supported or we just understaffed and we just need to set the right expectations with our stakeholders. So yeah. So the way I went about it is like just talking to people, having one-on-ones, and then just trying to understand more of like how are they doing from a work perspective, from a work-life balance perspective. How is that going for them? Are they seeing enough growth for them? So that's when you uncover more, right? Like when you give a more safe environment where you tell people, I'm just here to listen to you and understand what's happening and share some of my background, right? So I also have been in their shoes, that I've been someone who's been a Salesforce developer, a solutions architect, an enterprise architect. So I get the system and how complex it can be and how difficult sometimes it's to explain like why even adding a small feature will take 2 to 3 days, whereas the business expects it to be like that should be just half a day thing, right? So just telling them why I understand those things and then come up with uh, as a unified team on what our approach should be. So talking to people and getting some feedback was some of the ways I went about like realizing, okay, something is off in terms of how we are delivering and how we're doing our work here.
Okay, so I would classify that as, I guess, like expressing empathy and understanding, right?
Yeah.
So you could just people say, okay, I understand what you're going through. I'm on your side. Um, but you still have the issue of, right, okay, now what are you going to do about it, right?
Mm.
Right, because right, it's great that you understand. You're not going to hold it against them. They're not going to be penalized, let's say, right?
Yeah.
But right, how do you go about fixing it? And then
Mm.
how do you get them to, I guess, to be patient enough
Mhm.
so that they stick around right through the fix?
Yeah.
One last question before we jump to that. Did you conduct exit interviews as well?
Uh, Exit interviews, I thankfully did not have a lot of folks leave the team after I joined.
Right.
Uh, it was mostly people who just had some, personal things come up that had left. So since I joined, I did not I'm in a way lucky that I did not have to conduct a lot of exit interviews. But in my prior roles, I have done those.
Okay. Yeah. What are your thoughts on them?
Um, yeah, I
Oh,
think
let's
exit.
get to the crux. Are people honest in exit interviews?
Yeah, I think people mostly then share more on like what was really bothering them. And then sometimes you just feel like it shouldn't have gotten to that point and you're hearing of it during the exit interviews, right? Like, um, yeah, most of the time it has to do with how supported they felt overall in their role. It's never about the kind of like their role specifically. To an extent, it can be about the pay, but mostly people just leave when they don't feel heard or supported by their leadership.
Right. Okay, cool. Yeah, so it's back to my other question, just remind you, which was right, the path forward. How do you get people to stick around during the, let's say, healing process or the fixing
Yeah, yeah.
process?
Yeah, I think you then just show up as a leader where you set up some guardrails for them and kind of immediately set up ways of working, right? So we did not have a very well defined intake process. Although Slack is great for collaboration, but sometimes it can just be not the right space of doing requests, right? So we just stopped this concept of taking requests over Slack. We had BSAs on the team, so we just encouraged we should just formalize a more funneled intake process where we just have to work on things that are of priority for the business. So that gave us some breathing room. I got exec buy-in from my leadership and my CTO that foundational health of Salesforce is important. We cannot build more when we don't have a sound architecture in place. So there was a lot of buy-in and support I got from the team where uh, our CTO at Gusto was like, he's willing to go back and support me and tell our stakeholders that they need to hold off on some of these key business initiatives till we just make our foundations more stable, because it wouldn't make sense to build more on foundation. So getting that exec buy-in was important for me, and I was grateful that I got that support from my leadership in getting that time. So then I use that effort to just go more deep in our foundational area, look at more out how are we doing our code reviews, how are we making sure that any new architectural changes have oversight. So just establishing all of these processes of like, do we have an architecture review process in place when projects are happening? How are we doing our code reviews? And that led to more things, right? So happy to talk more about like we engaged with Salesforce's signature success services that brought in a lot of valuable information for us to really have focus on areas we need to improve on. And then have slowly and surely moving to a better way of doing DevOps, which is implementing tools like GearSet that we implemented.
So, um, what happened with the SI, right? Could you have the SI? I assume you had contracts in place. Project is in flight.
Mhm.
So, right, there's the twofold issue. One is the legal contractual issue, and then two is I assume there's some kind of knowledge transfer issue. And then
Mhm.
you have right, you have to what, you put the project on hold, then you go back, you refactor,
Mhm.
and you need to do that in a way where I guess you don't lose any knowledge. So
Mhm.
how do you tackle this kind of, it's almost like a double pivot, right? It's a pause, pivot, fix, come back, pick up where you left off, and you have the contract mess in the middle. So how did you handle that, or like what was your approach there?
Yeah, I mean, by the time I had joined, the global SI had pretty much, they were pretty much gone. Like they were in a specific time period where they
Mhm,
were, that's how they kind of operated. From this time to this time is when we are going to be there. This is going to be the transition period. So they did do their knowledge transfers to certain team members, but then those team members had also left. So it was an interesting kind of position to be on. So that's where we just like made sure that we had documentation in place to understand how things are built. So it then just meant people going in deep into looking at the flows and then documenting what it's doing. So it was understanding what is our current state and then documenting it and then aligning with like our stakeholders. Is this what you guys really wanted? And then kind of iterating it from there. So it was kind of like we were kind of building the plane as it was flying of sorts. Like uh, it was a period where there was frustration, but then at the same time, people knew that we're trying to make this better, right? So I think just having those expectations upfront with our stakeholders helped, and just having some grace and patience from their end as we figured this out, because they knew we were coming from a team that needs to rebuild itself. So part of it was like unknown knowledge, and then people coming in and then taking the time to look at the Apex code, look at all the classes, how they're connecting, how are the flows there, and then me making sure that just document this, guys. Like, just let's make sure we put the time now to document stuff for people to understand how this is working.
Okay. Any fun discoveries during this process?
Yeah, I mean, still, like, you would be surprised by the code quality uh, of some of these, well reputed global SI companies. Like, we just uncovered, like, their code was just not good. Like, it was like written by someone who's like few years of being a Salesforce engineers, and we were sold like we would get senior engineers. So just then, like, smaller things, just the naming conventions, how they did not go about creating helper classes, and then a lot of things that are frowned upon, even creating multiple flows, if for like after save on different objects, right? So not following those best practices. So that was like very hairy stuff that we uncovered there. We were trying to roll out specifically the omni-channel aspect of Service Cloud, and then just uncovering that they just had not used some of the more common best practices which anyone should have ideally used.
Let me ask you a direct question, Pranav.
Yeah.
You personally think GSIs have a place in startup environments? You've worked in a few, pretty much all your career, right? So
Yeah.
dating back from Slack. So do you think they have a place in startup environments?
From my experience, unfortunately, I don't think they do. Like, they just don't gel well with startups. So they definitely need to do some sort of an overhaul on specifically startup environments. So in my 15 years of experience, having gone through this in multiple other companies, it's just always been, man, we wasted so much money and this is the output that they gave us. Like, we could have just done this ourselves in a week with our specialist team and done something better, right? So in prior roles, they would come in and do an assessment of our implementation and tell us, what we need to do, and then they read out like, is this it? Like, did they just spend like 3 hours doing this and then gave us this after a month? So they just don't go deep enough. And because like startups are companies who are strapped on cash, every dollar is important for them. So it can't be like, oh yeah, 500K, it's fine, it's nothing. For startups, that's a lot of money, and we expect more from that level of investment.
So
Mm-hmm.
so where do you think you draw the line? Like how let's see, what size company do you think you should kind of switch over to a GSI, or
Mhm.
it's just a line, like a small company should use a smaller SI, and the smaller the company, the smaller the SI, and the bigger the company, the bigger the SI? They just try to line? Like how do you?
Yeah, I think companies that are there comes a point when companies have reached a certain level of maturity, right? So, like, being an enterprise architect myself, every company is in a given maturity stage where there's a business process maturity, there's a governance maturity, and all of that. So, typically, companies who go IPO, who work in a certain framework, have very specific roles and things defined. I think for those companies, they are more of a better fit, because it just kind of, then it becomes kind of like one size fits all for them, because certain assumptions they make are already in place. So yeah, companies that have been IPO or they're more public have been doing that for a few years is where I.
So just to follow up on this, you guys are a tech company, right? So I would assume your technology processes are pretty mature, right?
Mhm.
I would think that the tech startups technology processes are more mature than like a mid-sized, I don't know, sock company, for
Yeah, I mean,
manufacturing
you would
purposes.
assume that, but that's what sometimes with startups you do end up having tool proliferation,
Right.
right? When people who feel like, oh, this is a really nice shiny app and I need to get it. So when you don't have more of that governance, like things like a COE or anything established, then this tool proliferation happens, and that's what ends up happening with startups. Is like People just feel like I need to get this tool, this will do this for me, but they don't look at the overall tech stack and compatibility. So that does happen more in early stage startups where that if that governance doesn't exist, people end up buying more things than they need to. You'd be amazed, like some people just put their own personal credit cards and then get stuff done in companies when there is no certain level of governance in place.
True scrappy startups. You gotta love it. Love hate, I think. I got one question, and then we're going to move off the GSI piece. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Why do you think so many startups use GSIs then? What is the appeal of using a GSI if we probably all agree maybe startups aren't the best place for a GSI? Why do you think so many keep going back to them?
It's at the end of the day marketing, right? So they definitely have a brand and they sell a vision to founders and CEOs where they're like, this is what we'll get done for you guys. So just the thought that a company can come in which is well reputed and can build things for me faster, and then they'll be done and my things would be in place and I wouldn't need to spend more money in hiring more people, right? So that's kind of what gets sold to many of the startups. In some cases it may succeed, but in all my experiences I've had, it has not really gone so well. And that's where, like, me personally is like homegrown talent and then working with specific, like, more boutique Salesforce shops, people who know what they're doing and are more passionate about helping startups succeed, are what's best worked well for me.
Understood. You mentioned a few moments ago Salesforce signature success. There might be listeners that don't know what Salesforce signature success is. My understanding is it's basically a 24/7, 365 technical support provider relationship engagement, where they will, you guys will escalate issues, P1 issues, they get resolved 15, 20 minutes, something like that. It's quick ad hoc support. Is that the case?
Yeah, it is a level higher than premium support that most customers now have. So yeah, signature success does offer that as a feature, but it also adds many more things to it. So yeah, for companies, I would say it's not recommended for all companies of all sizes. You need to be a company which has which has a lot of dependency on Salesforce, where it just cannot go down for any, like, even for like 5-10 minutes. So you need to be at a certain levels of where you are, how many processes are in Salesforce, and how impactful Salesforce is for your company. For us, that was the case where we just did not have the luxury of our instance being down at any point of time. With signature success, you do get a kind of like an extended team member assigned to you, who will ensure that if there is a sev1, in all my experience with them, they've been able to get a Salesforce engineer within 5 minutes to it, to a Zoom call added, and then figuring out what needs to happen. So for a company where things are critical, that's invaluable. Like, that really adds a lot of value. It is a paid service, of course, but then you find the ROI when you have such things happen. But what many folks also don't know about signature success is they do a lot of what we call proactive alerting. So obviously Salesforce has more access to information about our instance. So they do have more certain level of threshold alerting. For example, if you're going to reach a governor limit, instead of us getting a message when you've hit the governor limit, we can set thresholds. Like, if I've consumed 75% of it, then it can trigger like a warning or critical alert. So that can then tell my team, like, oh man, we need to shut down some jobs or something. So then we can save a sev1. So it can prevent sev1s from happening. And then the best part, which I loved about signature success, is you get access to Salesforce architects for your initiatives. So you can have any n number of engagements. They are time boxed for like about 4 to 5 weeks, but they can come in, look at your process, look at what's happening, and then tell you, hey, this is the best way of doing it. This is our deck. They create really good flow diagrams, lucid diagrams, and help you understand where to go. So that that adds a lot of value if you utilize them the right way.
I think the key there is utilizing the right way, right?
Yeah.
For sure. Could be expensive if you're using them for basic admin troubleshooting, but used
Yeah.
correctly, I think they definitely have a value. So it sounds like your experience has been positive. Quick scale, 1 to 10. How 10 being absolutely, I'd recommend them. 1 being pass. How would you rate your experience with them?
Given the stage a company like ours was in, I would say it would be a 9.
Good.
And then as you become more and more mature and you have more controls in place, then it wouldn't be like a must have. Then it goes down. But as of now, for me, it's a 9.
Fantastic. Well, if anyone is listening and goes with Salesforce Signature Success, let them know that you heard it here on the podcast. But good to know. Switching slightly topic. Talking a little bit about the morale piece. I think this is your experience is not necessarily unique. It doesn't make it any easier to navigate by any means, but a lot of leaders come in and they face a similar scenario. Maybe it's not because of a GSI, maybe it's it could be a whole different bunch of reasons: acquisition, merger, company performance in the market not doing as well, natural disasters, whatever disasters like pandemic impacting things, right? So just talking a little bit high level about some of your leadership beliefs. You inherited this team. 25% of the team had left. How do you personally show up as a leader when morale is at a level low, all-time low? What do you do, right? Because you might be thinking, shit, have I taken on a job where maybe this is out my depth? They told me things were bad, but they didn't tell me it was this bad, right? And I'm losing members left, right, and center. How do you show up in that environment?
Yeah, I show up by kind of like being empathetic of that situation, because it's something I've also personally experienced. So I take it as like, if I were in their shoes, what would I be feeling, right? So kind of like putting on the therapist hat to an extent. Some of those sessions when you have with the team, when you have those one-on-ones, one is, trust is not something that can be taken. It has to be given. So you have to first come in with, not come in as someone who's aggressive, like, I want you guys to do work in this way, I want you guys to do this, I want these results. It's more of like, approaching it in a more open and cordial way. We're trying to understand and share my prior experience. I would share, like, when I was there in my prior role, this is what happened, and that kind of sucked. I just did not have great managers who understood Salesforce, and they would expect me to roll out functionalities. So that just helped people understand, like, they can talk to me about a technical problem as well, and then at the same time say that, like, people don't understand how complex this is. It's not as straightforward as just deploy everything in one go, and why does stuff take so long to do. It's them understand, like, you guys can tell me what your problems are, and then we go from there. So just having that approach, and then also talking to our stakeholders and, like, just setting the expectations, right? Like, guys, we are a company that's trying to do these many things. We have to have a certain level of maturity in our processes too, right? We have to define roles, we have to define boundaries and how our team operates. So it's also educating them. This is Salesforce team, or it's like an engineering team. We have a certain way of doing things. We need to be given requirements in a certain way. This is our process. QA is absolutely important. Things need to be tested, and this is what it will be, right? So a lot of it is then being kind of, again, build the relationship with our stakeholders and telling, this is my background, this is what we've done. And then a lot of talking, for sure, a lot of conversations, and then you need to walk the talk as well, right? You need to do things, you need to set up things in place. So it's like, we did not have architects back then. The concept of solution architects did not exist. So I brought in those roles, I created roles, because it was all engineers, all developers, right? We did not have any senior admins, we did not have SAs. So It's telling them like we need these roles, get the exec buy-in, and then hire for those roles. And then as architects came in, people saw the value, right? So it did not change overnight. It's just initially it was just asking the people to have their faith in me, give me some time, and just say that in 3 months this is where we'll be, in 6 months this is where we'll be. And that showed in our surveys, right? Like initially when we did the surveys, it was like the team just felt that workload was like 90% of the team felt like their workload was just not manageable. But then when we did the survey again after 9 months, that was down to now 40% of the team felt that. So it was like people felt that things are improving, and as we set the boundaries.
How do you navigate the balancing act between giving employees a voice to air their concerns, frustrations, challenges,
Mhm.
without creating an environment for complaining?
Yeah, I think
For
yeah,
the sake of complaining, right?
yeah,
Complaining
yeah,
for the sake of complaining.
yeah. I mean, my philosophy is people who are in this role, people who have joined us, have a certain level of professionalism, right? Like I expect them to be professionals, and work that needs to be done. So there's no question about that. If there are things that are hindering them from talking, let's talk about those. But when you talk to people and you get some of those feedback, you can cut through what is like BS, and people just need to kind of either they need to grow up of sorts, right? So in mostly like I treat people with like you expect them to be at a certain level, you expect them to be professional in that sense, and not just be in that complaining mode all the time, right? If people are those, then you just tell them, like, just give them direct feedback, like, you're in this role, this is what's expected, and you have all the means to be successful, and this is what's been done. If you're still seeing issues, let's talk, but then you have to be direct and upfront about those things.
Are there any indicators that you keep track of, or metrics that
Mhm.
to keep a pulse check on where is morale in the business, right? I know it's something you're priding yourself on keeping the levels high.
Mhm.
Uh, what do you keep an eye out for?
Yeah. Like smaller things, like are people participating in demos, right? Like are people talking about their work and coming into those meetings and doing a demo of their work? Uh, and just how is their engagement in team meetings? Like, are they, turning on their video and then being more active and kind of sharing some of those things? So those are indicators, like how is the team doing? Am I seeing folks sharing enough? Am I seeing enough comments come in Slack? Am I seeing enough demos from them? So those are some things. Um, we do track like PRs and all of those, but me personally don't believe like how many PRs submitted is actually a sign of how invested they are. It's just more of like the work that's getting done. So there's a difference there.
Hmm. And then I guess in terms of defining success from a morale perspective,
Mhm.
morale, you mentioned surveys and redoing the surveys.
Mhm.
Morale's not really a KPI people talk about, right?
Yeah.
It's sales, it's retention of employees, which could be to an extent to do with morale. You do the
Yeah.
surveys. Any metrics that is it as simple as, well, nobody's left, so our morale must be good?
Yeah.
Or are there other indicators and metrics that you check on a quarterly, yearly basis, maybe in your reviews with your leader, right? That you're being discussed
Mhm.
about in that one-to-one.
It's through peer feedback and other stakeholder feedback, right? Like, for example, one of the feedback that I got from one of my team member in prior roles was, um, whenever I wake up, I now feel motivated to work, versus earlier it just used to be a dreadful task of me opening the laptop and then kind of getting to work. So it's more of like that unstructured feedback on like how are things going. So internally we use a tool like Lattice to capture some of those feedbacks, and then uh, just the sense of like how are people showing up. So for example, for certain admins, the feedback we would get from stakeholders was they were just so invested in making sure I was set up for success, where they just showed up more differently. So those are some of those kind of like not direct KPIs per se, but receiving feedback about your team on tools like Lattice, and encouraging people to just share, either private or public feedback about their team members are some of those indicators that I've seen work well. At the end, there's no one size, like one solution for all of it. It's more of like you definitely need to have a pulse of it. So it's not very, like, I wouldn't say this is a fixed way of doing it. It's a mix of trusting your team and then seeing how they show up, and then getting feedback from their stakeholders on how are they showing up. Like, did you see any improvement in their engagement, any improvement in their communication, and all of that.
You mind if I ask, is your team on-prem or remote? What's the on-prem remote mix?
It is mixed. We do have an office in the San Francisco area, but it's spread out throughout the US. So as a team, we come into the office like once or twice a week. So it's kind of hybrid in nature. Every quarter, we do all of us meet in one location, so either in San Francisco or in Denver.
Mhm.
So we make it a point to have some FaceTime with each other, but primarily on a day-to-day basis, it's kind of like you'd say it's remote.
But they're in the same city, so they're coming
No,
in once or
it's spread from California to Texas to East Coast, and some.
right.
Mhm,
Okay, so tying back to our topic, like did that pose a challenge with
mhm.
with like gauging morale? Because it's hard to know somebody who's not in the office if they're checked out, right?
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah.
and you can't do things like, hey, let's have a happy hour,
Mhm.
or let's say a quick pat on the back in passing, even.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
that's where those quarterly things would help to make sure everyone felt heard, and kind of like you treat them to, like, dinners and stuff. That's the smaller things, but then even like for very small things, people who are like on East Coast compared to folks who are on West Coast, it's just like just update your Slack message and say what you're doing, or like dropping off, picking up kid from school, so people know what's happening, right? So it's just doing small things of like, half of the time people are like, is this guy working or not? Again, you should just not have that at the back of your mind. You just expect them to be professionals and do the work that they're assigned. How they do it is up to them. When they are needed in meetings, you just make it absolutely clear that you're required in these meetings. Try to be sensitive to their times. But if it's ad hoc, you just expect them to be in those meetings, even if it's off hours, and that is occasionally. Use tools that you have, right? Like just update your Slack status, say I'm out, or this time is personal time, or others, and people then understand.
Right. The other point you made, which I think is probably super, I don't say misunderstood, but it's not recognized enough, which is positive feedback. And the impact on morale, like people who feel their work is appreciated will like continue to do
Yeah.
better work and will definitely be happier uh, doing it.
Hmm.
But that works well, assuming the business is really happy, right? So like in your case, business was not happy. The system was, let's say, not
Hmm.
as they expected.
Hmm.
And then you told them, we're going to take a step back and stop making any kind of improvements and fix foundational stuff.
Hmm.
Um, I can't imagine the business was thrilled with that. And even if they were accepting of it, they're not really going to be giving, positive feedback. Hey, your change made a massive improvement,
Yeah.
right? So,
I mean, we did not fully shut off all stream of work, right? Again, it's
right,
again you are still building a plane that's flying. So it was more of, instead of just half a person's time focused on foundation, we gave that more support, like give 4 people assigned to it. But then you had still about 8 team members that were focused on it, right? And that's why we do have a lot of contractors that work with us pretty much full time, to make sure that this stuff still gets done with oversight from tech leads, to ensure they are not breaking something in our
right.
architecture. So we had to find that balance. The balance was not, there was not a lot of focus on the foundation. We just had to
Right,
make
right, right,
sure.
I get it. I get it. It's limited, but still,
Yeah,
the business wouldn't be right. Let's say super
yeah.
thrilled.
I mean,
But though,
yeah.
getting back to that point, like, did you talk to the business about providing positive reinforcement? Was that something that was proactive?
Yeah, like shared earlier, it was those conversations with our stakeholders and letting them know what's the plan, because
Hmm.
no one likes surprises, right? So it is letting them know for the first 3 months, this is what's going to happen, this is what we can commit to realistically, but other than that, this is what will take us to get to a more stabler state. And for your day-to-day stuff and not your big projects, we will ensure that gets done through our contractors and FTE support that's needed. But then bigger initiatives will just have to wait another 6 months till we stabilize this. So again, like having your exec buy-in from roles like CTOs are key, because then they are able to influence them, right? So a lot of it is in businesses, in startups, there is an aspect of having the political alignment, making sure people trust each other, and then having exec buy-ins from CTOs definitely helps you with that. So basically asking for air cover, and then getting that. So for the stakeholders that are like, do you guys want more step ones? Do you guys want to have customers trying to call you and not being able to reach your agents? Like, is that something you want to continue having? So them understanding like, oh shit, like for 10 years we've been kind of doing stuff and no one has really taken this lens, and they would get it, right? They also get, they folks who've been doing in this space, they understand like how technology works. Not thrilled about it, but then it's the nature of the role.
So going back to the mixed team, right? So you're saying you're using a lot of contractors. Does your approach change when dealing with, let's say, a full timer versus a contractor? Your approach to
Yeah,
managing
yeah.
the
it,
individual
it, it
regarding
does.
how that makes sense.
FTEs, people who are actually with the company, are definitely more, they feel more attached to the company, right? They have more sense of ownership, which in an ideal scenario you would like to have more FTEs, but the reality of it is like you cannot have n number of resources. But still, with contractors also, you also expect them to be more involved and more engaged. And like, kind of like I saw a post which, you had shared, Kiro, was like a lot of companies now in this year specifically are moving to that near shore option, mainly because of the fact that they want people to be in the same time zone and be in meetings so that they can have ownership. Offshore models work, but then if you have to wait for every Jira ticket comment to come back and then work just gets delayed there, it's a model that works, but again, having the right mix for the right roles, it makes sense. So for contractors also, you need them to feel empowered that, hey, you also have a manager. At Gusto, we call managers PE, which is people empowerers, who can help you navigate whatever you guys want to do, and also have one-on-one. So my directive to my engineering manager is like, have the one-on-ones with your contractors as well on a weekly basis to make sure they are doing well and they feel supported. uh, it does obviously change when it's an FTE. FTEs definitely get more focus on other things, but with contractors we just don't like hire them and forget about them, right? There is an aspect that we make sure that we check in with them.
Okay, cool. So, and what about like just general career planning? Any tips on that for your employees? Like, how do you decide
Mhm.
who you feel, for better or worse, needs to shift roles,
Mhm.
or get promoted, or if you want to bring a contractor
Yeah.
in house, or bring someone offshore over, sponsor them? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, career progression is something. So you need to map out what are the different roles in this ecosystem. So the main roles are a Salesforce admin, a senior admin. From there, you can become, you can go towards the solution architect track, or you can go towards the BSA track if you want to be more functional. So, and then you also have the developer tracks. Many admins can take on either of this career track as they become more senior. Typically, senior admins, as they kind of evolve and have been doing that for many years, try to become more on the solution architect side because they want to be more closer to the architecture and still be relatively hands-on. For developers, senior developers can kind of continue that path. After you reach certain levels, uh, they take on more of the responsibility of team leads and making sure there's proper oversight in terms of code quality. So just defining a lot of those, then just making roles like technical architects also available for senior engineers, that they can have a more broader scope of work. So all of that is something you define, you put that in paper, set kind of like general guidance on like what it means and what we expect for these roles to be. At the end of the day, there also has to be like a business need for it. um, Contractors is more of like how much volume of work are we seeing from our business coming in, right? So just factoring in that, so that involves a lot of planning, budgeting, and all of that. So we try to get ahead of it. When we just don't have, hiring FTEs takes time. So if something needs to be done ASAP or has a very short time frame, that's when we go with hiring contractors, and get that short term work accomplished. Does that does that answer your question?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So Pranav, your team's about 40 people, correct?
Yeah, 40 including FTEs and contractors. Yes.
So we definitely, also just echo what you shared. This year, the contract demand has increased significantly, and especially an appetite for contract to hire as well as nearshore as well. With a contractor, at what point are you thinking it makes sense to keep this person in-house full time? I get certain projects might require a certain skill set, and it might not be, it might not make business sense to retain that resource if they have a niche skill set, or from a cost perspective, it might not make sense. But
Mhm.
at some point, I think, retaining the knowledge, and somebody that already knows business, fits in with the culture, the team is aligned with that individual. There are obvious benefits there. Every hire is a risk, but if somebody's already in your org, it's a low risk, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
what are some of the, very quickly, what are some of the signals that you look out for if you're thinking contract to hire?
Mhm.
What are the type of signals that you look out for? What are the type of individual traits that you would be more inclined to convert someone to full time?
Um, yeah, from specifically on the trades perspective, is the ownership mentality. Like, how do they show up in meetings? How are they taking up the work? And then in terms of like, how do we decide someone needs to be like a contractor versus more of an FTE? It's like, is the amount of work that's going to be coming be continuous for like 6 months to a year? Like, how do we envision that work to be? And if it's going to be continuous maintenance, and we know it's going to be there for like at least a year, and we know we don't have budget for like hiring people, but we have budget for contractors because there's separate budget for each of those categories. That's when, like, first preference is to hire FTEs. But then if you have contractors who are available and have been with us for longer and can potentially convert, then you just look for their communication skills, their ownership skills, how are they showing up in meetings, how are they collaborating with other team members, and all of those kind of those
Mhm.
skills.
We're seeing a trend, as I mentioned, for more demand for nearshore.
Yeah.
Something we talked about pre podcast and during. We just touched on it slightly. It's not something that's necessarily new to you. You've managed nearshore and offshore teams. What have
Mhm.
you found that works well, and also what has been like a lesson learned that maybe something didn't work so well when managing teams across different time zones and in different geographic locations? And then the
Yeah.
follow-up question to that is, how do you create a culture of inclusion and
Mhm.
ownership for offshore and nearshore teams?
Yeah. So for an offshore model to be successful, there needs to be also the relevant roles in an offshore, for those offshore team members, right? Having an offshore engineering team only and not having anyone from product or BSA in offshore hours makes things more more frictional, right? It just adds more time to tickets, more time to getting stuff done. So it's kind of like finding the right balance of how many offshore team members do you truly need. Should you have more heavier on offshore than nearshore? So that decision comes in like, what's our process of getting work done, right? So nearshore works because then people can be in the same time zone, attend those meetings, and don't need more hand holding or specifically very well drafted Jira tickets for them to work on. So that's where having nearshore adds that value, where they can have more velocity, more ownership. Um, then to kind of, for the offshore model to work, you need to have kind of like some level of team meetings which are more conducive to their hours, right? So having like, okay, on a monthly basis, having a 7:30 a.m. or an 8 a.m. meeting on Pacific time is something you can try to do, right? Like it's not something you can ask the team to kind of try your best to log in early, have some sort of a connect with those teams and see it. Many offshore teams, which is kind of unfortunate, but they do mostly extend themselves and are available later in their nights. So if they are have a fixed schedule, then we just align on a time which is like not crazy hours for them, but still a decent time for them to make sure they are in the stand-ups. They can do those stand-ups with like talking versus just having Slack updates or Teams updates in them. So just making them more engaged, hearing them helps in that model. And then it just becomes on the type of work that's needed. And that'll help you in making the decision, should this person be near shore or offshore?
Yeah, it must be difficult with the PST piece. Obviously, Maz on East Coast and I'm Central for
Yeah.
customers. It's a big, it's another 2 hours difference, right? It's difficult. But very quickly, one more question on the onshore nearshore piece before we wrap. What roles do you think are best suited to be nearshore offshore versus onshore, and what roles should absolutely not be nearshore offshore?
Um, Roles like product owners, product managers, PSAs should not be near shore. Offshore, in my opinion, they should be more closer to the stakeholders. Those should definitely be, where the stakeholders primarily are. Um, Roles like general help ticket triage, administrative help, like L1 type of support, those are good for being offshore, in my perspective. And then roles that just require specific level of work where you have work clearly outlined as a Jira ticket where developer help is needed, those specific roles are also good for offshore. When you need, where, and this is again applicable to many startups, where you have stuff that needs continuous iteration, things are changing, you have to be more agile. In that working model, having near shore is a better alternative because it's costly. It's from a cost perspective, it is definitely cheaper than having folks onshore. Um, and then onshore is when you are just having a really critical function, right? Like for example, if you do not have anyone who's managing telephony, and someone, that is something that is needed definitely at that point of time, and you do not have any FTE support there, that's when you would get someone, you know onshore as a function, right? Depending on the criticality of the work that they have to do.
Awesome. So we're just about at time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So last question. What's next for, I guess, for Gusto or yourself, anything within the Salesforce
Yeah.
industry or space you're super excited about, or big plans and implementation?
Yeah, I mean, of course, AI is definitely impacting so many things, right? So even at Gusto, we are an AI first company. So that will have overall impact. And I think that'll have a lot of impact in other companies as well, especially in this space of business systems, enterprise systems. So I see the future of a team like these becoming still more leaner, but still more impactful, right? So the pivot for someone in my role also is like, we've been doing things in a certain way. Now that we have access to, we have engineers in our org, we have access to, AI technology. What does a new Salesforce implementation now look like? How can we not be um, a huge team overall? Like, not saying numbers really matter, but still like a leaner team, which then does more for the business and is more productive. And then you're part of like kind of the whole AI strategy, right? So it is definitely here. It's for everyone that I tell my team also is like, we all cannot just be complacent in where we are. Things are evolving. We just need to then find the right overall skill sets. We need to know how LLMs work. We need to know how integrations work. How can we do more with less? I think that's the general theme that you'll be seeing happening a lot in our spaces, and we just all have to kind of embrace that, and just make sure you keep up your learning. Learning never stops. So that's something I always tell my team, like, you should never stop your learning process, and that should be a continuous journey, and that applies to me as well. So that's kind of what where company like Casto is also headed towards, is embracing AI in all of its areas, from our customer perspective. If you've seen, we've launched Gus, which is like an internal AI tool for Gusto to help our customers, and then we're then embracing that on how can we do that more for our internal team members as well.
Awesome, super exciting times, and for anyone that's going to be at Dreamforce, maybe they can hear a little bit more about that if they get the chance to come and see you in person. I'll be there, so we'll definitely pick your brains on how that's going. But Pranav, that is a wrap. So we just want to say a big thank you for joining us and talking about your experiences at Gusto over the last hour. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really nice talking to you guys, and great questions.
Thank you. For our listeners, don't forget to subscribe to the CRM Success Show for more episodes featuring leaders like Pranav, who are truly shaping the present and the future of the Salesforce space. You can follow us along on LinkedIn, or alternatively, watch along on YouTube. Until next time.